Are you an adventurer looking to take your hunt to the next level? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to East Meets West Hunt with your host, Bo Martonic.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Another episode of the East Meets West Hunt podcast. Got some, it's getting towards the end of February here, and it's about to get full swing into shed hunting and spring scouting for whitetails here in the Appalachian region. Got a trip planned here for coming up this weekend with Johnny Stewart, who's a past guest, and also Greg Litzinger, who was a past guest that I recorded with the Total Archery Challenge last year. And those two guys, so Greg's from New Jersey, Johnny's from southwestern Pennsylvania, they're coming here. We're going to a brand new piece of public land, and we're going to scout it and do an overnight camping trip and just see, what we can find and more or less learn from each other. So I'm really excited about this trip, and been traveling every single weekend to shows and events and everything else. And I haven't gotten out in the woods myself very much, which is very unlike me here. But I've got a lot of time slated off here for March to get some scouting in and get prepared for the 2019 season. So the guest I have on this week's podcast is Josh Boyd, and Josh is from northwestern Montana. He is just an absolute stud when it comes to hunting mountain whitetails, which is the basis of this podcast, talking about western mountain whitetails, as well as he's been killing elk consistently in an area in the United States that's arguably the toughest area to kill elk, in an area in northwestern Montana with low elk population densities and large predator presence and just thick, nasty, steep country. So on this one, we'll be focusing on whitetails, but I'm definitely going to get Josh back on to talk elk hunting, as he's hunted elk all over the place. So he's a great resource from that, and I've learned a lot from Josh, and really excited to have him on, and someone I've looked up to for quite a while as well. So to get into the partners of the podcast here, start off with the University of Elk Hunting by Elk 101 and Corey Jacobson. So this resource is your one-stop shop for elk hunting knowledge, planning the hunt, every single phase going through there. Corey has put together his many years of elk hunting knowledge, and he didn't leave anything out in this platform. Been signed up for 3 years now, and will continue to be a part of that. So he's offered up a code for the East Meets West listeners here. If you type in East Meets West at checkout, you'll save yourself $20 on a 1-year membership to the University of Elk Hunting course. Then we'll dive into here Heather's Choice. Heather's Choice is a partner as well, and someone that I've used their products from the very beginning. High quality, healthy backpacking and hunting nutrition. So the food is dehydrated meals, anywhere from breakfast, dinners, to the highly popular Packaroon snacks, which is like a coconut cookie. And so Heather is also offered up a code here for the listeners. East Meets West will get you free shipping on any orders over $99. Another partner of the podcast is Maven Optics. So as I introduced Maven onto the podcast here recently, it's, again, if you've been following along with me and anything I've done even well before the podcast, you know that I've been using Maven Optics for a while, specifically the B2 9x45s for elk hunting and the B3 8x30s for whitetail hunting here in the East. So Maven is created the highest quality optics at a much lower price point than their competitors by using the direct-to-consumer business model. And so Maven's offering up a gift here. So anybody that uses the code EastMeetsWest-gift at checkout will get you a free gift with any optic order off of the website. So they do have a demo program. Since Maven is direct to consumer, you're not going to find them at a Cabela's or any other retail store. So they offer up a demo program where you can try out their optics for a couple weeks, see what you think. You don't like them, you send them back. It's a pretty cool program that they do there, and want to make sure that it's 100% customer satisfaction. All right, now we're done with that. Let's roll right into the podcast here. Josh Boyd, Northwestern Montana. Let's talk mountain whitetails. All right, welcome back to another episode of the East Meets West Hunt podcast. And I'm on the line tonight here or today, I guess, where you're at, but with Josh Boyd. Josh, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Yeah, it's still day here. It's still late afternoon with the time difference between here and there.
Yeah.
Still looking at some daylight.
Yeah, and you were just telling me before we started recording here that you have a nice view for the podcast. You have to drive a little bit to make sure you have good cell reception and everything, but sounds like you have a good place to do it.
Yeah, I do. It's where I live. It's kind of remote, mountainous country, and cell service is pretty spotty at my house, so it's easier to come. It's only 5 miles into town, and it's good cell service. And then if I bump up on the hill a little ways, I get a great view while I'm chatting on the phone, so it's not a bad thing.
Well, cool. You can't beat that. So, Josh, tell us a little bit about kind of where you live at and a little of your background.
Yeah, so I live in western Montana. I'm kind of tucked up more in the northwest. It's kind of an out-of-the-way place. There's not a lot of highways that come through here. Matter of fact, there's just one. So most people that are familiar with the area usually are passing through somewhere, either to Missoula or Glacier Park, or they're heading the other way to like Seattle. So it's it's a good place to live. It's remote. It's a tiny little spot. Population of the little town I live in is like 800 people, and it's kind of a depressed economy. So it's hard for people to make a living here, but it has decent outdoor recreation opportunities. So that's kind of one of the reasons I have decided to plant my roots here. I grew up here, and I'd kind of wandered away in my earlier adult life, out of high school and into college and out of college. And I ended up having an opportunity to come back here and work for the Forest Service and in the field of hydrology. So I'm allowed to make a decent living for the area, and it also allows me to get outside and hunt as much as possible, and other things. I like to ski. I used to do a lot of climbing, and I still do a lot of mountain biking and road biking and stuff like that. So it's a good place for that.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like
and
it.
there's just tons of public land too. So that's a big bonus. As far as like hunting goes, my background is, I grew up hunting out west. I grew up in Montana. I learned to hunt deer, whitetails and mule deer and elk from an early age. Actually, I accompanied my dad out in the field when I was 4 or 5 years old. And in Montana back then, the first year you could hunt, the earliest you could hunt was 12. I think they've changed that now. I think you can hunt deer when you're 10. But so yeah, I've been out in the woods my whole life, kicking around with my dad, my uncle, and grandfather. And then I've just sort of been doing it kind of as an adult myself. It's one of those things where it's become a passion in my life. It's been a main driving force for a lot of the things that I do. So okay. I started bow hunting as soon as I could, and my father didn't bow hunt at all. He rifle hunted, but I had some neighbors down the street where I grew up that were in the archery elk hunting, and that just lit the fire. And they kind of took me under their wing and showed me some of the ropes, and I just got obsessed. And so yeah, I've been kicking around hunting out west my whole life. It's a good place to have. It's a good place to be just because of the diversity of the animals you can hunt.
Oh yeah, I mean, you're saying as far as like, having elk, mule deer, whitetails, and black bears, anything else that in your area, and I'm sure there's even more than that. Plus all the additional, like you said, outdoor recreational activities. That's a pretty rare thing to find.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really is, and I get on kicks when I hunt too. It's like I become obsessed with certain things for a while, and then the flame kind of burns out a little bit when another obsession kicks in. I'd say the exception to that for me is elk. I've always been obsessed with elk. They're kind of the main driving force of most of my planning and activities have been around elk, but at times the fire gets lit to go hunt spring black bear, for instance, and then I'll be into that every spring for 5 or 6 years and just obsess about it. And then, I'll kill a couple and then that desire wanes a little bit and I'll have something else pique my interest. For your topic of discussion is, it revolves around whitetails a lot. So I had the fire lit for whitetails at several different times throughout my life, but at one point, more recently, I just decided I wanted to archery hunt big mature whitetails with my bow in the rut in Montana, which happens to fall during our general rifle season.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, that was an interesting dynamic for me when I started researching, hunting, western mountain whitetails and through Montana and Idaho and stuff. I didn't realize that during the rut, you can really hunt them with either a bow or a rifle.
Yeah, I would say, you are hindered somewhat with a bow. You start looking at techniques that give you an advantage, and a lot of that is, stand hunting. It'd be pretty dang tough to archery kill a big whitetail by still hunting, or or drive around, doing some pushes or anything like that. It'd be pretty tough in this country, but it could. But yeah, so I definitely employed and researched a ton of Eastern techniques to hunt whitetails out here, and I think Eastern guys that come out this way would probably do pretty well once they figured out how whitetails move in this country and how they utilize the terrain and the vegetation and what kind of food sources they key in on at different times of the year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's definitely something that I hope works for me when I get to go out there. Hopefully I can employ some of the stuff that I've learned and have a chance at hunting some of these mountain whitetails of the West. It's something that I really don't think that I was really aware that was out there until a couple years ago. And you're actually one of the first people that I saw doing that. And so, Josh, you're a sick big game ambassador, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And I like to think that whitetails are big game.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
they have some specialized gear for sure.
Yeah, no, and it's the reason why. So that I think that I don't know if that's how I found you, or maybe I met you at ATA show first a couple years ago. But either way, I started seeing some. I remember a specific photo of yours with just this big whitetail, heavy beams, everything like that, and I'm pretty sure it was on Instagram that I saw it, and I was like, geez, those kind of whitetails are, out there. I didn't think they lived, in the mountains of the West, because I don't know. I guess I never thought of it really. And that kind of opened my eyes to that ability to be able to hunt them. Yeah.
This part of the country used to be on the radar of big whitetail fanatics back in the 70s and 80s, and maybe a little bit into the early 90s, but it kind of started petering out a little bit once a lot of the stuff in the Midwest started blowing up, as far as just the amount of habitat that was being generated and places leased and groomed for giant whitetails. But western Montana, north Idaho, even central Idaho, it produced a lot of giant whitetails. Region 1 in Montana I can't remember how many deer that are over 200 that have been killed out of like the Flathead, the Sealy, Swan Country, Sanders County, Lincoln County, all, that whole Region 1 area of Montana. And then you bump over the border into Boundary County and Bonner County in Idaho. There's a bunch of giant deer that have been killed. We're definitely not in the heyday. But back when I first started growing up and hunting, there was a potential to shoot a Boone and Crockett whitetail in any drainage you walked up. That doesn't exist today. I mean, that's changed drastically. There is still a potential just because of the terrain we have, the amount of cover we have, how much roadless areas we have. Deer can survive to an older age class, but things have changed here. It's definitely not the heyday. You don't see those 140, 150 inch deer just trotting around all over the place.
Why do you think that's changed?
Everybody's pretty quick to blame it on wolves, which they definitely have a part to play for sure. I think it's a fairly complex story. Some of it comes back to the amount of vegetation management that's happening out on the forest. So back in the 70s and 80s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, there was a lot of brand new virgin timber harvest, and it opened up a ton of new edge, new browse. There wasn't a lot of roaded areas yet on the winter ranges. Predators were controlled quite heavily. So, vegetation management's definitely played a key, and then predator management as well. And then we've just, things have grown up, and we've had some hard winters, and just the habitat's changed. There's been a lot of fire suppression. Mountain lions are now a game species in Montana, where they used to be a predator. So now in our area, they're on a permit. So there's just a limited number that are killed every year. Back in the 70s and 80s, they were killed readily. And they killed a lot. And there's a lot of black bears killed too in the 70s and 80s. Our spring bear hunter numbers are way down compared to what was happening in the mid 80s up here. There used to be just truckload after truckload of guys from Utah that would come up and hunt spring black bear, and they shot every bear they saw.
Interesting.
So they curtailed a lot of that spring bear harvest by shutting the season down early, like 2 weeks. The prime 2 weeks they cut off because they were thinking there was a lot of black bear over harvest. So it kept those numbers trimmed. Then, of course, there were no wolves on the landscape at that time. I think the first pack popped up in the North Fork of the Flathead in the early 80s. Might have been like 79 or 80, 81, somewhere in there. And they were pretty limited in where they were ranging, and there were a couple other little stragglers popped up here and there, but the number of packs in the landscape it was basically nothing compared to what it is today. And then, of course, there was with a lot of the logging road building that we had, there's a lot of noxious weeds were introduced, and some of that came into effect on some of the winter range areas. I don't think that's a huge issue, but it is an issue, and it probably plays a small part. So I guess it's a complex problem, and I don't want to sound all doom and gloom because it's still good deer hunting. It's just not what the heyday was like that I can still kind of remember.
Yeah. I was going to say, you grew up there, so you've seen the kind of transition. So to you, yeah, it might not be, what it used to be. But what you're saying is it's still not terrible by any means.
Right. And I've had these conversations with other diehard local whitetail hunters who showed up in this area. One guy in particular that I talk with all the time, he moved out here from Wisconsin in I think he said he came out here in 87, 88, somewhere in there. And he showed up kind of right in the middle of the peak of our giant whitetail herds. And he's kind of said the same thing. He's like, it was nothing for me to pass up 150, 160 inch deer, just because there's always that opportunity of that 180 stepping out. And, he's killed a couple that are in that range. I know he has one over 170 inches, and he's got one that's like 182 or something, 181.
Wow.
But anyway, he's like, man, if it's a 140 inch deer, there's a good chance you might not see another one like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, which is still a great deer, especially for a general season. And our season's 5 weeks long. It's a rifle season, or any weapon season, I should say. You can use anything you want, within a couple legal parameters. But, so, most people pack rifles and most people shoot a deer. There's a lot of deer killed, but, just not a lot of giant deer being killed like there used to be.
Yeah, that is a pretty long season,
It is. It really is. North Idaho's got a slightly different season set up, but they have a separate whitetail season that starts earlier than mule deer in North Idaho. Then they've got a pretty healthy whitetail population, but I think their numbers are similar to ours. I don't think they've seen maybe quite the decline that we have, but it's real similar. I think the trend is still there. It's a declining population of older age class deer.
Yeah. There's as far as so North Idaho, Northwest Montana, Western Montana, all those places, do you have a grizzly population as well in those areas?
Yeah, that's another thing that's changed too. We do have a grizzly population. North Idaho has quite a few bears. I don't know the number right off the top of my head, but I know the area that I live in they've estimated it around, pretty accurately actually, around 50, 55 bears in this ecosystem. And then the Northern Continental Divide ecosystem over in the Flathead has a big population of bears, well over 1,000 in that population. So, and that's the stuff like from Glacier Park down into the Bob Marshall. It spills out onto the front into the Swan Range and then over to the Missions, and all those areas have big whitetails, and they've had big whitetail herds in the past, and there's still a healthy population there. You go further south in some of that whitetail country down around Missoula and south into the Bitterroot, occasional straggler bear wanders in and out into that country, but no grizzlies. A lot of wolves down in that part of the world, and I believe their mountain lions are on permits as well down there. It's like in the West Fork of the Bitterroot. I think that's all permit. So, and that area used to have just a massive population of whitetails as well. But so yeah, and a big part, I think, what's keeping a lot of our whitetail numbers down here, just to round off the subject, is the weather we've been having. We've been having some pretty harsh springs, and so that's knocking back a lot of our fawns. It seems like those springs that just don't, or those winters that just don't want to give up, and they just roll into those. We get some late dumps down into like late March, early April. Those really knock the snot out of those yearling fawns.
Yeah.
So you lose a big chunk of that class of deer, And that this year was really tough to find a mature deer here, just because we had two really harsh winters. They were big winters and long late springs, and that was in 2011 and 2012. And we had another big one, well, just last year. But those 2011 and 12 year class, those would have been our big mature bucks from, this year, next year, and last year. So, but we had a couple moderate winters in there, and there's still plenty of deer running around.
Mm-hmm.
It only takes one.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's
the right one.
That's an interesting kind of mix of things that are, playing into your age structure and, the size and everything of the herd with your whitetails that we don't see in the East from a lot of those perspectives. As far as like the way the timber cutting and everything goes, that definitely has a play in it. But as far as predators and things like that, it's not as prevalent. I mean, we have coyotes and black bears and stuff like that, but not the, the wolves, grizzlies, mountain lions, things like that. And I'm sure that, I mean, this is again assuming, but that the whitetails kind of adapt. Like, I'm sure like when the wolves came in at first that it was a little bit tougher, and they probably did pretty well with getting a lot of deer, but maybe as they, adapted to living with them, that they got better with it. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but it's just kind of an assumption from my part.
Yeah, no, I think so. And, we also in that time frame had gotten the ability to hunt and kill wolves, which plays, a fairly large part into it. But also, once the wolves eat their food stores down, it gets tough for them to make a living too. So the pack sizes have, kind of started to dwindle and disappear. I don't think there's as many wolves in this part of the world right now. That's just my observation. I could be way off, but I don't see as many tracks when I'm out in the woods anymore. So it seems like the wolf after the deer population has sort of kind of dropped off, so did the predator population. It started to follow suit. But yeah, you're right. When the wolves first appeared, it was perfect opportunity, perfect conditions, I guess, for packs to grow. And they did. I mean, they just exploded across the landscape. For your listeners to, I guess, for their background information is, our wolves in this part of the world weren't introduced. They came here naturally. Most of them migrated down out of Canada, so they weren't put here as an experimental population like they were down in Yellowstone. So everybody talks about how wolves were transplanted and blah blah blah. It's like, no, these things showed up on their own. They moved for the most part. There might have been one or two plucked from like a problem pair from down in Yellowstone and dropped off, but I mean, there were packs established here well before that. So most of these wolves they just naturally came back on their own. And I saw wolf tracks when I was growing up as a kid, out in some of these remote areas. I distinctly remember the first pair that I saw, and I could not believe the size of the track. And I thought, that is the biggest dog track I've ever seen in my life. And I was like, there's no way that could be a dog. I mean, we are so far from any house, any remote, little ranch house, that cannot be a dog. And then, I could tell the way they were running down the road, the tracks, that they were definitely a wild canid. So, and that was way back in that was probably like 80. That's probably around 1990. So
okay.
That was 6 years before they put him in Yellowstone. Was it 90? No, it was 94. It was like 4 years before they put him in Yellowstone. So there was like a 9 mile pack. That was kind of a famous pack. I think there's a book written about them. So there were some packs that were coming back in this area beforehand. But when the whitetail population started to rebound after a major winter we had in the mid 90s, the wolves were here on the landscape to take advantage of that. And they ate wolves like kids in a candy store. They went at it, or they ate deer just like crazy. So Anyway.
Yeah, interesting. So,
So
Josh,
it sounds like you're go ahead.
no. Go ahead with what you're going to say.
I was just going to ask you, so it sounds like you're potentially going to come out and hunt either western Montana at some point or northern Idaho and try to kill a mountain buck.
Yeah. So it's still up in the air yet whether it's going to happen this year or not, but I'm pushing for it. I really want to get out there, like you said, to one of those two locations, and been doing a lot of e-scouting online, talking to people like yourself that are, local to the area and everything. And there's just something about it that's really wanting me to get out there and kind of see too if some of the things that I'm, doing in the Appalachian Mountain Range, carry over to that. And hopefully, by, talking to people like you and everything, get some information as well as I have already, and to be able to kind of compare, how you're hunting them versus how I would kind of approach it, and, come up with a game plan for it. I don't know. It's something that's not talked about a whole lot as far as hunting those western mountain whitetails, and who knows? Maybe it's for a good reason. I don't know, but I really, there's just something about it that's drawing me to wanting to do that, and I understand that it's definitely probably not going to be an easy hunt by any means, but I really want to give it a try.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge, that's for sure. Just trying to find one and get it within bow range. A nice mature buck it's a challenge anywhere.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I'm not super familiar with the Appalachians, but it sounds like it's, similar. You guys, I was listening to a couple of the other podcasts, and it sounds like, I can't remember their names, but you had them on there from Pennsylvania, and they were hunting some deer, and they were spending a lot of time scouting.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a lot of what is required here to be successful.
Do you do a lot of scouting for whitetails?
I not anymore, not as much as I used to. I still like to get out and scout as much as possible. I'm more limited on the amount of time I have available to get out and do it. But like I said, when the fire was lit and I was, all crazy about trying to archery kill some big woods deer, I spent a ton of time scouting. I put in tons of time walking around, looking at rubs, figuring out rub lines, shed hunting, bedding areas, learning topography, what vegetation was where, how they were utilizing everything. So yeah, I just put a ton of time in. Like I said, now it's a little more limited. I still have some spots that are good that are still, full of deer from my previous scouting efforts, but things change, our landscape's pretty dynamic. So, nothing's constant. Those deer quit using some things for whatever reason. I don't know. It's part of that puzzle that's kind of fun to try to figure out.
Yeah, I don't know if it's this way with you, but here in Pennsylvania and a lot of the spots I hunt, they're always doing different timber cuts and everything else, which is good, but it can definitely change the way the deer use the land. And sometimes they'll do it in like August, right before the season starts or anything else. I go in and I'm like, geez, everything looks 100% different. And, that's just, adapting to it. But there's definitely areas that I know, me personally, that I can kind of go back to every year as a fallback plan, not even walking in there since the year before, and have a good chance at, seeing something or being in a good position the way that they use the land. But so I guess there's a little bit of that here too when you have a good spot, it can be good for a while. You just don't know how long, I guess.
Right. Yeah. When stuff grows up too, that's a big part of where I live. Is a lot of times, an area might be good for 5-8 years, but then the vegetation starts getting a little too thick and they just quit using it, or they're still using it. You just can't see them. So yeah, things change quite a bit. So it's good to keep scouting and keep keep coming up with fresh areas, and you never know what you're going to find out there. So
Yeah.
that's a big driver for, I think, most hunters. They like to explore, they like to find stuff, and they're kind of like gamblers. You never know when they're going to, hit 21.
Yeah.
It's going to happen at some point.
Yeah.
Keep playing it long enough.
What's like the terrain and everything look like? I know you said it's mountainous, but as far as like where these whitetails are living at, kind of give me a little bit of a background on, what the forest looks like, what the terrain looks like, and kind of where they're living at.
So, where I'm at, it's pretty much valley wall to valley wall is timber, like from mountaintop to mountaintop, all the way down. So we have these big, I wouldn't say they're big mountain valleys, but they're mountain valleys that have some big flats and some big rivers dissecting them. And there's deer down there. And you go up onto the slopes of the main mountains, and there's deer there. And then you can go even higher and find whitetails up there. So a lot of them will transition down closer to the valley bottoms in November if we have a bunch of snow. But if we have a light, and November is one of those months around here, it's like you don't know if you're going to get snow. Sometimes there's 1.5 feet, and sometimes there's nothing. But so yeah, it's just heavy timber. There's a lot of like rolling timbered mountains, but they're big. I mean, they're 3,000 feet above the valley bottom. So they're pretty tall. They're expansive. Lots of water here. So there's a ton of little dissected streams coming out of the mountains. And it seems like, depending on your aspect, your vegetation changes considerably. So you can go from a southern aspect, which is covered in kind of open, like ponderosa, Doug fir type of trees, maybe some open stands of larch, to wrapping around to a more eastern face, and it's a little thicker Doug fir. If you go on the north-facing sides of stuff or down on these creek bottoms, there's a lot of hemlock and cedar, just thick, dark stuff with nothing really growing on the ground, just a really dense canopy. And then if you go a little higher, you can find these mixed stands of fir and lodgepole and spruce and lots of other species. And those deer use them all, and they use them differently at different times of the year, it seems like. Yeah, I mean, it's fairly complex, and there's a lot of nuances, I guess. But I tend to I like to find those dark pockets where those deer like to hide. And we have big flats too. We have big timbered flats, and a lot of our big flats have been cut over. They've been cut over maybe 2 or 3 times, since a lot of them are in the valley bottom, and that's when that was the easiest timber to cut. Back at the turn of the last century. So they were cut early 1900s, and then they were cut again in the 1950s, and then they were cut again in the 1990s. So there's a lot of different age classes of trees here too. So and they had different techniques that they used for harvesting. So there's some places the soil's been really compacted, and trees didn't grow back all that well. So there's just full of brush and shrubs and stuff. So it just kind of creates these little micro sites that have different species growing in them. And those are kind of neat areas to try to figure out how deer use them, if they use them, and hunt. But those great big timbered flats are kind of fun to hunt too, just because their features are so subtle on them.
Do you tend to like stick to the edges of them? Like when you get those giant, timber cut flats and everything like that, how would you kind of pick out a location to hunt with that?
Well, if it's a clear cut, I definitely stick to the edges, and I'll tend to look for stuff that's like back off the edge a ways. And try to key out some key travel corridors. kind of force deer past my stand. Sometimes all these clear cuts that were put in are just all these crazy different shapes, and some of them have little curves to them, or some of them bottleneck down and then spread back out. And a lot of times you'll find some pretty key corridors at those bottlenecks, and it's kind of your classic whitetail hunting. It's just, you're looking for just little subtle things to push deer and keep them kind of corralled in a certain area when they're traveling back and forth between areas. So, but yeah, if these big flats, if they're big and they're timbered, man, that's a tough one. You might find something that a buck's using just randomly, but it seems like the use on those giant timbered flats are pretty random. They just are kind of all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems like they're cruising across those flats. They're cruising somewhere. And so I'm looking for a place where they want to go and where they're headed. So sometimes on the far side of the flat, it might be a mile away. It might be a little draw heading up another ridge, like a side of a mountain, and they might be going up partway up that mountain and bedding or something like that. And so I'll kind of key in on stuff where they're going to funnel off that flat and then go bed or go to feed the other direction.
Okay.
But as far as like hunting a big wide flat, man, it's like you could roll the dice and sit out there. You could kill one, but it could be days before a deer wanders past.
Yeah. What you had mentioned as far as them going to like a food source or anything, what is their and I'm sure this is another complex answer, but as far as, do they have any like main food sources, or are they more browsing on stuff?
Earlier in the hunting season, by that I mean more like October, they're eating a lot of grass. They're eating grass and maybe some annuals that are out still alive in like clear cuts in the riparian areas along streams, more moist areas and like little depressions and stuff like that. But once we start getting some weather and that grass gets covered up, a lot of them will start going to browse. So they're starting eating more woody shrubs. And then at some point, in this part of the world, if we get a bunch of snow, they transition to eating moss out of the trees.
Huh.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
It's that brown or that dark kind of black moss that hangs down. Man, they eat a lot of that stuff.
Really?
And that stuff's everywhere.
Yeah.
So they just wander around and eat that stuff and just, yep, they're happy. Man, they winter on that. They live on that stuff, which I don't know how they do it, but, and they also eat a lot of other woody shrubs too, but they round out a lot of their diet with that black moss. And if you're ever around a fresh logging job, in the middle of the winter, they're always just loaded with deer. They come in to eat the moss out of the tops, out of the trees.
Huh.
So,
Josh, I was hoping you were going to give me that, one-liner, like they're going to go feed here, but I knew better than that it was going to be complex. They feed on the browse and everything else. I knew that was going to be kind of your answer. I didn't know the specifics on it, but I figured that that's what makes them hunting those so difficult.
But there's areas in North Idaho that have a lot more ag in their valley bottoms. So like over in Boundary County and Bonner County, there's a lot of hay meadows over there and some crop. I don't even know exactly what they grow over there, but there's some ag that butts right up against the mountain sides, and those deer key in on some of that stuff. What it is, I don't know. I'm not a farmer. I don't even profess to even know what they grow over there, but I do know they use that stuff, and they'll stick to alfalfa fields if there happens to be a local alfalfa field. I killed a deer several years ago just by accident. I threw a stand up not too far off of an alfalfa field, and it had been raining a whole bunch, and it kind of got the alfalfa sprouting again, and the deer started hitting it. And I had a nice buck strut right in 20 yards, not even that, 15, just perfect broadside, and killed him. But he was out, they were out in in the alfalfa, which is just a little tiny hay meadow down off the river bottom. And if you can find a situation like that, it's good to go, but you can't rely on it. It's only under certain conditions where those are good. And we don't have cropland here. So, clear cuts, logging units that are, 2 to 8 years old, they definitely use. So I'll sit, like if I'm rifle hunting deer, I'll definitely sit those edges. I'll creep the edge right at daylight and just still hunt it.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times I'll pick up, if there's a little point I can see most of the unit in, I'll sit on that in the evening or even all day I'll sit there. And sometimes you'll catch a deer, just a buck cruising across that thing, especially during the rut,
mm-hmm.
which is, you never know where they're going to be in the rut.
Yeah, no, that's the worst time to key on a specific deer, which I'm sure that's a little tougher to do, there and everything. As far as from what you had told me in the past, those deer move a lot and can, change elevation and train quite a bit. But as far as during the rut, I mean, you definitely have, in my opinion, a greater opportunity at deer. Do you key in on anything specific when you're hunting the rut?
Yeah, I just kind of key in on travel corridors. I'll try to catch them. Basically, I'll try to set up where I know does want to be and where does move through, and I'll just sit on those and it's a lot of it comes back from a lot of the scouting that I've done. But it's just using a lot of the terrain
mm-hmm.
to kind of pinch things down. They're like everything else. They, even in a big timbered environment, a lot of the times they like to travel through a low spot. They want to stay out of sight from other, there's predators after them in the woods. So, they don't want to be seen by a mountain lion or a wolf or whatever. So they'll travel these little low swales between points. They'll cross, a saddle on a ridge line, stuff like that. So I'll key in on stuff like that.
Okay.
And then I also like to hunt. I like to hunt previous year's sign if I can. If I know that buck's still alive, I'll key in on that. I'll look for multiple years worth of rubs in an area. I don't know about where you're at, but here, a lot of times if there's a big dominant buck in the area, he'll rub the same tree multiple years in a row. And I kind of key in on that, and I'll try to hunt those rub lines the next year before the rut kicks off. Because it seems like here that they make their rubs pretty consistently before the rut. And once the rut is in full swing, they're often running.
Yeah.
They're probably still in the area, but you just don't know where they're going to be and when they're going to come back through. So it's more of a crapshoot, I think.
Yeah. Okay. So if you were, all right, say you don't live there and weren't able to scout it in the spring or anything, is there anything specific if you were looking at a map that you would key in on to check out? And with that being said, when you would go out to hunt there, would you recommend taking a couple days more or less to scout, or how would you approach that coming from an out of state perspective? Say you were going to Idaho.
Yeah, so I'd do like everybody probably these days does a lot of Google Earth scouting.
Mm-hmm.
So you can kind of narrow stuff down pretty quickly just by looking at Google Earth imagery. You have to take into account that a lot of that imagery is a couple years old. Some of it in our area is, it's 4 years old now, almost 5 years old. So a lot of the vegetation's changed. It's a little thicker in real life than it is on imagery. but you can get things narrowed down by that. And I look for clear cuts with some big areas of timber between other clear cuts. And so I'd kind of key in on that and have some areas kind of somewhat lined out, maybe 3 or 4 different places to check out. And if I'm going on a 10-day hunt anywhere, 3 of those days, man, are scouting. Like, I think it's worth spending a good chunk of time scouting and figuring stuff out before you actually start hunting. Mm-hmm. It just pays off. It makes you more focused, and it just narrows so much of it down. So yeah, I would definitely come out early, and if you can't, just spend a couple days whittling it down.
Yeah.
And ground truthing everything and coming up, looking for sign, figuring stuff out. I mean, it's big country. Anywhere in western Montana and central and north Idaho, it's big country. And once you set foot out in some of these stands of timber, it's like, holy cow, it's a long ways across this flat. I didn't think it was this big.
Yeah. Google Earth is famous for that. I learned that when I first started hunting elk. I'm like, I'll go check this out, and then in a few hours I'll go check this out. Yeah, okay, that takes all day to get there.
Yep. So yeah, funny. I would definitely do your homework online, but then I would budget a couple, minimum of 2 days to try to figure stuff out. And the nice thing about here, you can hang your stands and leave them, and no one's going to touch them. If you do find some sets that are just like perfect, I need to put a stand here, and I'm going to hunt this thing several different days, but I also want to hunt someplace else. So you can go hang multiple sets and have them set up all season, and no one's going to screw with them unless they're like right on a gated road right out of a main town or something like that. And you see boot tracks all over, but for the most part, no one's really going to screw with your stuff.
Yeah.
Which is nice. I usually leave, if I'm hunting whitetails and I'm hanging stands, I leave them up all year. I mean, not all year, all season. I'll throw them up and I'll go back and get them about, December, January, after the season's closed. I'll go back and pull them.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Are you kind of saying that the hunting pressure is a little bit lower, or is it just because there's so much land that running into people is a little bit tougher, or maybe that the fact that they just don't want to carry it out either?
Yeah, I'd say it's both. I mean, the hunting pressure is definitely lower than back east. And we just have, it's just such massive country that you can get away from people. And here, like anywhere else, the further you put your boots away from a drivable road, the more you're going to, have it to yourself. So if you walk a half a mile or a mile away from your truck, you might see somebody, but it's not likely.
Wow.
So, and it's kind of that way all over the West,
Mm-hmm.
At least the places I've hunted, but elk hunting, I've hunted quite a few different places. And if you just get a little ways away from the truck, man, you're not going to see too many people. So everybody wants one close to the vehicle. And there's a lot of people that shoot them close to the vehicle. One of the techniques, in this part of the world is drive logging roads until you see a deer, and then you shoot it out of your truck window, which is not legal. You have to get out of your truck and get off the road, but it happens all the time.
Yeah.
But for those who want an adventure, it's here. You can have it. There's plenty of country. There's a lot of whitetails and a lot of public ground to go poke around on.
Yeah. No,
one thing I
cool.
will say, if for people coming out, there's a lot of commercial timber ground that's out here as well. And they have various rules on how that is accessed by the public. Some areas are just wide open. Some little chunks get leased to like private entities, private hunting clubs, but other ones have like a sign-in procedure, or you might have to buy a permit. So if you're looking to come out to, especially in Idaho, I know that goes on a little more than it does in Montana. Definitely check with the timber company that owns that property and see what their rules and regulations are.
Yeah, no,
but most of the time they're open.
Okay. I mean, that's a lot of what Pennsylvania is too. And it's stuff that doesn't show up that you normally would see. But if I see, again, that's just from me growing up with it. If I see a timber company owning it, usually you can contact them or look on their website and they have public, knowledge on it. Or there's places I've hunted in Ohio that we just go and get a written permit and it's free. Sometimes there's ones that cost like $20 or whatever it is, but they'll allow you to hunt it, and that kind of really cuts down on the hunting pressure just because people don't know it's available.
Right. Yeah, and I would have to say some of our better whitetail hunting right now is on that private timber company, just because a lot of it's been cut recently.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of fresh whitetail or fresh clear cuts on some of that stuff. So it's a little more open. They do more active management on that stuff, and it's a lot. But there's some places that are just like huge swaths of clear cut, and there's just no cover. So there's, you kind of got to weed that out too a little bit. Now, they like clear cuts, but they don't like giant ones, and they like to have some cover nearby where they can hide. So there's that happy medium.
Interesting. So with that being said, if you had, a week to 10 days to go somewhere, what week and month would you gear in towards?
If you want to hunt active rutting deer and have a chance at probably the biggest bucks running around would be, I would say, that last week in November.
Okay.
For this part of the world. Yeah. They're actively chasing and seeking and breeding. That week before is pretty good as well. But right up to the 1st of December is really good.
That's interesting.
In Montana season, it always ends. Our general rifle season ends the Sunday after Thanksgiving, and that varies from year to year on what date that is. But Idaho in the Panhandle, they run their whitetail season to December 1st every year. So it's pretty consistent closure. So you can really plan on hunting that last week if you want, depending on whatever year you're headed out. Mm-hmm. And I've seen some absolute Donikers running around that first week of December. I would say the top 5 of my biggest bucks I've seen that first week of December.
Really? And they're still rutting at that point?
They're chasing does. They're actively chasing does. So they might be like a second cycle coming in about that time. And so there's a limited number of does coming in, so they're just getting really active and getting with it. But yeah, I've seen some giants. I've been out cat hunting with some buddies that first week. That's when our season opens up, that first week of December for mountain lions. And seeing a couple like hop across the road that would just, your jaw would just hit the floor. Wow. Well, actually last year I saw a giant that first week of December. Came back from Thanksgiving break and was out in the woods doing some work, and my work partner and I were just kind of cruising through this big timbered flat, and I started seeing some giant rubs on some trees, and they were multiple year rubs. They'd use this buck had used these trees several different years, and I told this gal that was with me, I was like, man, there's a big buck living in here. And she's like, really? So I kind of told her, about the rubs and that type of stuff, and showed her some of the trails coming down off the mountain. And we probably walked another 10 minutes, and just an absolute giant hanging out with a doe 40 yards away. Just stood there broadside, strutted around for a good, I would say a solid minute. Stood there. Oh, he was a beautiful buck. And I wanted to go back and hunt them this year, but I didn't get a chance to go after them just because I had a late season Utah rifle permit that's highly hard to draw, like really tough draw odds. So I figured I better go hunt Utah bull elk while I have a tag in my pocket.
Yeah, I don't blame you there.
But that buck is on my radar for sure. He was an absolute giant. So they're out there. I don't know where he lives. You don't hear. I mean, I've talked to several people about that area, and no one's really said that they've seen a big buck in that area. And I know a pretty solid whitetail hunter that lives close by, and he hasn't caught wind of it. So who knows where that deer comes from? He might have just shown up from 15 miles away just for a couple weeks and then just disappears again.
Yeah, that's crazy to me. That's so like a lot of the bucks and stuff there. When you're talking like an older age class, what do you consider an older age class for out there? How old do these bucks typically get?
Oh, I'd say our biggest of the big they're like 7 to 8 years old when they're like fully mature. Mm-hmm. When they've reached their potential for antler size and body size.
Yeah.
That buck you were talking about earlier in the podcast that I showed you on Instagram, that buck, I think the biologist said he was 8.5. I stopped by the game check and he aged him and he was like, yeah, that thing's 7.5, but I'm pretty sure he's 8.5. So he's an old deer.
Yeah.
And I did kill a deer several years ago. It was 12.
12 years old.
He was just gum. I think he was senile too. He didn't know what was up.
Oh my.
But, yeah. I think he just committed suicide. But yeah, so our deer, like when I'm talking mature deer, I'm talking like 6 to 8.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty old deer. Some people consider a mature deer at 4.
Mm-hmm.
But which I'm not going to argue that point. But I don't think they're as big as they're going to get at 4.
Oh no, definitely. When you get to that age group, you're in a whole nother class of deer. That's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So, but yeah, they can live fairly old out here. Just have to have the right conditions. They got to get roll those dice and get lucky and have some easy winners and escape a bunch of predators and then don't get shot by some road hunters, and next thing you know, you got a giant deer.
Yeah.
But they don't come easy.
I'm sure not. Does calling sequences work at all during the rut? Do you call at all?
I do. Rattling works really well at certain times. Definitely during the pre-rut, it seems like before the peak of the rut. Even during the rut, I've rattled some bucks in, but I used to rattle a lot from the ground when I was just still hunting. I would just kind of still hunt, and then I would set up and rattle. Man, I know I blew it on a bunch of big deer by doing that, because those big deer come in downwind almost every time.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started rattling out of a tree stand, and I saw how often they came in downwind. And that's when I refused to rattle from the ground ever again. It's like, this is not going to happen. Unless there's something, like I have a hard backstop behind me where I know nothing's coming in behind me.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it's amazing how they can key in exactly where you're at, and they'll just come strutting in. Some of them will come straight to the tree. But a lot of times they'll come in, they'll sneak in, and you'll hear them every once in a while. You might hear a little twig or something, but then you turn around and there's one standing behind you looking. So they're like ghosts. They just appear out of nowhere. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, probably.
No, that's good. It's good to hear kind of the similarities and the differences. I mean, I have the same experience with rattling. I haven't done it a whole lot. I've done it a little bit more in the last couple of years, and I've had bucks come in, but those bigger deer, like you said, they tend to circle downwind. Even out of a tree stand, it's tough to, even get an opportunity at them because they're smart with it, or they'll come out they'll get to the edge of the thick stuff and look out and say if there's like a little opening or a trail in front of me. If they don't see anything out there, they're not coming in.
Yeah. They're pretty cagey, but they do come in. Sometimes they'll just come tearing in and stand there all wild-eyed looking around, and that makes it all worthwhile. It's pretty fun. But I would say, if I rattled 10 times, I might get a response once. I might get maybe one time. Might even be once every 20. So it's not high percentage, but it's enough to make it worthwhile.
Yeah.
And it does work. And I've used grunt calls. I've used the little double bleats and stuff like that. And I've used those calls, and 20, 30 minutes later, a deer comes walking by. Was it because I was calling, or was it I was just in a good spot and he decided to walk by? It's hard saying.
Yeah.
They didn't act like they were coming in to my calling.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I know I haven't scared any deer away by using it. I've used calls and stuff with them in sight, and they just kind of look at you and they just kind of continue doing what they're doing. But
yeah. Huh.
That matter of fact, that big buck, my biggest whitetail to date, I rattled that deer in. Yeah, he came in. Well, actually, I rattled, and then there was some deer in front of me, some small bucks that were just barely within sight of me through the screen of timber. They were probably like 60, 80 yards away. They started kind of sparring, and they were like small, like, little 3x4s, 4x5s, and they were just kind of clicking and clacking and doing their thing. And they ended up calling like two more smaller bucks into their group. And so there's like a group of 4 now sparring and messing around in front of me. And so I just hung my antlers up and let them kind of do their thing. And I decided I better kind of pay attention and see if one of those big ghosts was slipping in some way, somehow. And I happened to look over my left shoulder, and I could see the top of this big larch tree. It's probably like, 3 inches, 4 inches in diameter. And I could just see the top of it sticking up out of a bunch of other trees, and it was just whipping back and forth, whip, whip, whip. And I thought, oh man, something is tearing the snot. It looked like a bull elk raking a tree. And then out walks this big whitetail. And he came strutting down to those other deer, but he kind of took the path like right down in front of me. And that's when I got a shot at him.
Huh.
So, yeah, pretty fun.
Yeah. So when
talking about this makes me want to go hunt whitetails.
Is that going to get you fired up to get back on that kick and obsession?
Yeah. So last few years I've been obsessed with elk for sure, but also mule deer. I've just been hunting mule deer a lot lately. And they're awesome and they're neat critters, but hunting whitetails is pretty fun too. I think I've killed more big whitetails than I have big mule deer for sure. Mm-hmm. And I think that's just the product of me wanting to hunt whitetails more than mule deer.
Yeah.
But they're both equally fun, but.
And your tag is only good for one or the other, right? In Montana?
In Montana it's good for either or.
Okay.
So yeah, you get one, you can shoot one deer, and it depends on the district you're in, but most districts it's open for either whitetail or mule deer.
Okay.
So you can shoot either one if whatever you happen to come across. And man, I'm not even going to talk about Idaho. I know you can buy a general deer that's good for whitetails, and you can shoot a mule deer when their mule deer season opens in certain areas.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to say they've got like a whitetail specific tag as well. anyway, if your listeners are interested in Idaho, definitely look up your regs as well. Figure that out.
So I'm not going to, I want to preface this with saying that I don't know the answer to that with all areas, but I know specifically, I still might be speaking out of turn, but I know in the Panhandle in some of the areas you could get a general tag or a deer tag that was good for whitetail and mule deer. But the problem was the mule deer season closed, like say, for example, November 14th. And then the whitetail season went till November 30th. So there was like some sort of an overlap there with the seasons that maybe if you hunted during this specific week, you could have a chance at both. But if you hunted later in the season, in the last week of November or something like that, you would only have a chance at whitetails. But
right, that sounds about right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I mean, I usually have a deer tag in Idaho every year. But I have the general, and I haven't mule deer hunted over there in the last few years, so I can't really speak to that either.
Mm-hmm.
I've just hunted whitetails over there.
Okay, so I guess with that, there's one thing I wanted to circle back around on when you were talking about the predator aspect. Is that you've kind of, I guess, for a while now grown up around them and lived around them and stuff, but is that kind of different dynamic, hiking in with either stand on your back or going to a stand in an area where, you're dealing with grizzlies and wolves, or are you seeing them out of the tree stand at all? What's that kind of like, coming from an Eastern perspective? That's a whole different dynamic.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. There's certain areas in the Flathead Valley and in the Sealy Swan region in Montana that you would definitely want to have bear spray with you in November if you're hunting whitetails. There's certain areas where I live you probably would want to have bear spray with you as well. North Idaho, there's certain areas. I don't really think too much about it until I see a track. A fresh grizz track, and I'm like, oh man, I don't have my bear spray, but I do have my rifle, which isn't, I don't know. That's a whole other topic of discussion, but
yeah.
I feel way more comfortable with bear spray on my hip and a rifle in my hand than I do with just a rifle. Or throw that rifle away and put a bow in my hand. I definitely want my bear spray.
Yeah.
So it does add a degree of I don't know. I wouldn't say walking on eggshells, but you're definitely thinking about things a little differently. Yeah, you're just paying attention more to what's happening around you as you're hiking in, and but if I've never had anything come by my stand. Grizzly bears for sure. I mean, our densities here aren't super high, but over in the areas where there are a lot of grizz, I could see it happening. They're out wandering around that time of year. They're keying in on gut piles and dead deer that time of year, So
perfect.
I would definitely keep an eye open for them. They're not around every tree. And wolves, I mean, whatever. The only thing where they come into play is they can kind of make game hunker down and not move if they're in the area. And I've seen that, I've hunted areas where it's like, man, there is nothing moving. What is going on? And, you cruise a little bit further and like, oh, well, yeah, there's 8 wolf tracks right here. No wonder. And they're, the way those wolves hunt, they're just cruising, covering country, and they break up, and they'll be like 2 will go hit a pocket of thick timber, and this other pair will branch off and hit another pocket of timber, and they'll come back together. So they're basically doing like a big multi-wolf drive, deer drive sort of a deal. And so they get things riled up when they're in the area. Once they leave, the deer know it, and they kind of get back to their normal way of life.
Yeah.
So, and lions, I've seen a handful of lions out in the woods when I've been whitetail hunting, and they're usually just slinking along. Sometimes you'll just see them just like leap across a road or a trail in front of you and then just disappear. there's been a few times where I've walked up on them and they're like walking away from you, and they don't know you're behind them. But I really don't have a big fear of lions. They can mess with you, and there have been attacks across the country, people being killed by them. But I don't know. That'd be a rare occurrence for a lion to turn on you. I have heard of plenty of people, and I know some people that have been stalked by them, but it's usually during like an elk calling sequence. They're calling elk and they're making cow calls or whatever, and they turn around and there's a mountain lion crouched watching them, kind of a deal.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say if you're doing a lot of ground calling, that's when to be a little more aware of what's happening around you. But for the most part, I don't give them a whole lot of thought.
Yeah,
they're out there. They're seeing you. You're probably not seeing them, and they generally will just go the other way.
It's funny.
I think they get.
It's funny that like the first time that when I hunted Colorado, I was like, this is the first time I'm really hunted a place that had, a mountain lion population. And I felt like, I was always looking around at first and everything. Then after I got into hunting those type of areas with them, I didn't even think about it anymore. Like this past year, it was, it's always in the back of your mind. And I've cut a couple tracks in the past, but never anything that I was like really concerned about. We're going out there, it was definitely in the back of my mind just from the fact that, I'm not used to being around it. And I know like some people that come from areas in the Midwest that don't have black bears, they come to Pennsylvania where we have a ton of black bear, it concerns them. And to me, I don't think anything of it. Like I'd never really think much about black bears, but I guess it's just what you get used to. And I guess with your situation, having all those different predators, probably being, aware of it is definitely important.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, yeah, I think was it last year? Must have been last year. I did a quick hunt with a buddy of mine, and we started off hiking up a trail, and there was fresh snow on the ground, and we hiked up the trail, and on the way in, we cut a big mountain lion track. And actually, I think we jumped it in the timber with our headlamps on, because it was fresh and it was running away from us, which was good. And so we went up the mountain a little bit further, and then we hit a bunch of wolf tracks, and then a bobcat track, and then we got to the top of the mountain and started dropping off the backside, and there was a enormous grizzly bear track. This is the biggest grizzly bear track I've ever seen. And we saw two mule deer and a couple whitetails. So it was a pretty slow day, but man, the predators were out in force. And then of course our boot tracks were predators as well. So yeah, mountain was full of predators that day. It's just crazy to think about what's out there. But the nice thing is, like, we got to come home and have a beer in a warm house, man. Those suckers are out there trying to make a living in, knee deep snow. It's crazy that they can survive and persist out there.
Yeah, that I would not want to be on edge like that all the time. I like being able to go out and do that, but it is kind of nice to be able to come back and grab a warm shower, have a beer and a hot dinner, So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so a whitetail that lives 8-9 years old out in those environments, man, has he got to be smart and tough, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, and they get chomped on a lot. You see a lot of dead ones. But you see a lot of them are hit by cars, too,
Yeah.
There's a lot of them get smoked by vehicles on the highway. And it's a tough living, that's for sure. But when you see a wolf kill of a deer, there is nothing left of those things. I mean, it looks like a bomb goes off when a pack of wolves tears into a whitetail. I mean, they eat everything down to the bones.
Really?
You'll see like a hoof and maybe like a little chunk of the pelvic girdle and a piece of spine. I mean, that's it. Sometimes an ear or something, but they eat everything. It is insane.
Yeah. It's funny.
chomp it.
I mean, even coyotes do similar to that, and they always like you'll find bones in random places. They tear off with them and chewing on them, and even with like the antlers and stuff too, and shed antlers. I found in like weird places that I know I've walked before, and then you see a little bit of like chew marks on it and stuff. A coyote probably was playing with it and dropped it or whatever else. But it's amazing to see how nature works, and nothing kind of goes to waste. That's for sure.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, I found a moose shed like that laying in the middle of the road one spring, and I know that sucker was not there for very long. It was just laying there, and it was full of teeth marks, and sure enough, there were wolf tracks right there in the snowbank nearby. But yeah, I'm sure they grabbed it somewhere out of the brush and packed it onto the road and chewing on it. Makes you wonder if how many big whitetail sheds get packed off and chewed up.
Yeah.
Because there's so many, like, I found so many big singles. It's like the other one's got to be here somewhere. But it's like, wonder if something packed it off and chewed it up.
Yeah, no, I bet that happens because I mean, this is just my opinion with them, but it seems like a lot of the big whitetail sheds that I've found and my family's found and everything, they're usually, if it's a really big one, they're relatively close together. I don't know if it's just uneven weight on their head or what, but you know what I mean?
Yep. No, it's the same way with elk sheds too. It's a bigger bull. It seems like it's easier to match up a pair just because they just shed more consistently, or I don't know. Like you said, more weight on their head. They just want to get it off. Something. Yeah.
No, that's for sure. But yeah. So, Josh, is there anything else that you can think of from a Western mountain whitetail perspective that you'd want to cover here?
Man. We covered a lot of ground.
We did cover a lot of ground.
Yeah, I would say, I would say for if people are interested in coming out, definitely just do some Google Earth research. And I guess another thing to go along with that would be pair up like some topo maps with your research, because that gives you that gives you a really good idea of what the ground actually looks like. All those little tiny swales, especially if you're looking at some flat country or more rolling timbered stuff, it just gives you an idea of where the little breaks in the ridges are and where the little, you might start connecting these little like pothole swampy areas together. Maybe there might be a little stream that runs between 3 or 4 of them, and that might be a great little corridor to go check out for deer traveling up and down the edges of it. So and a lot of times you're not going to see that on Google Earth. So I'd say grab some topo maps of your area that you're heading to. Do some old fashioned map scouting, or you can just download them onto your phone or your tablet or whatever.
Yeah,
but they come in pretty handy. I don't know if people still do that or not. I do.
Yeah.
I know when I went to Utah this fall, I grabbed all the topo maps for that whole unit. And I had them handy. Yeah, I like. I'm a little old fashioned that way too.
Well, no, I mean I love I rarely even use a GPS anymore. I use the Onyx on my phone, but I always when I go to a spot, I like having a printed out map. And even like if we're sitting, if I'm sitting down in my basement and reviewing it with some of the guys I'm going hunting with or whatever, I like having a physical map there. And even, when I go elk hunting and stuff, I get one printed out and I have it packed up in my bag. Do I refer to it a whole lot? Not usually, but if I'm with, a couple guys and we want to, instead of looking at the phone screen or whatever, we'll throw it down on the ground while we're eating a snack or something and kind of look at some spots. And it's nice to have that paper map too,
Yeah, it is. Something physical you can draw on and you write notes on and stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, cool. That's some pretty good information. A lot of information packed into this, as far as hunting these mountain whitetails. And like I said, I'm excited. I hope that get to do that this year. If not, it'll definitely be on the radar coming up here. But my personal expectations, or what my goals, I guess, with it is, I'd love to shoot obviously the biggest one on the mountain, as we all would, but, I'd like to shoot, a 4-year-old whitetail, mountain whitetail. That's what I'm looking for, out there. It doesn't have to be the biggest deer out there, but for me, I'm going for more about the experience and the hopes of one of them giant, those ghosts coming by. But with a certain amount of days there and everything, I'm going to definitely be realistic with my expectations and hopefully make it happen.
Heck yeah. Yeah, I think you can. I mean, if you focus and have a good area narrowed down and come out with that in mind, I think you'll be successful for sure. If not, I mean, it'll be more fuel for the fire for the next trip for sure.
Yeah, kind of like me with elk. It's one of them things where I've got enough fuel. I'm ready to get that done, but that's another topic.
Yeah, we should talk about elk at some point, because that's one of my definite passions. I love to bow hunt elk.
Well, that's what we'll definitely talk about that on another episode. I'll get you back on and we'll talk elk, and I'm I'll tell you exactly what I was telling all the other guys I talked to about it. I need your one tip to help me kill a bull. I don't know, just one secret.
All right, let's see if I can come up with one.
No, I'm just kidding. But I would definitely like to get you back on here and talk elk specifically, and I'm sure we could definitely go down some rabbit holes on that one. I'll be interested to hear about that.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's a topic that I don't grow tired of talking about. That's for sure. It's one of those things that, like I said earlier at the beginning, it's like that's what kind of drives my existence anymore. It's like elk. I cannot get enough. It's ridiculous how much fun it is. And if I can hunt 2 states every year for elk and archery season, I'm usually a pretty happy dude.
Yeah.
And if I don't, it's like, I kind of feel like I'm getting gypped a little bit, but I'm definitely spoiled by the amount of time I get to take off and go chase them. And my location allows me to hunt a couple states pretty easily. So
yeah,
super fun.
Well,
but
cool.
Yeah, that's another topic for another time.
Yeah. Well, we'll get something on the schedule to do that too, 'cause I'm definitely going to be going out west here elk hunting. And actually, I mean, I talk a lot about whitetails, on the podcast, but most of the people that listen are about, going out west and hunting. And for the most part, elk seems to be the first thing that comes up for a very good reason. But, so yeah, I think we could definitely get something going with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Too bad you weren't going to be out at Western Hunter. That would be a good time to sit down and do another one, but that's okay. I'd like to do one in person with you at some point, just because it's just easier to chat with people face to face.
Yeah, no, it's really tough over the phone. I like, that's what I said to you at first. I was hoping to link up with you at ATA, and we just kind of, we saw each other there, and both were, talking. The Sitka booth was extremely busy this year there and everything, but I would definitely like to be able to link up at, a show and be able to chat face to face. It's just easier to do, that's for sure.
Heck yeah. Well, let's do it at some point for sure.
Sounds good, man. Maybe this fall when I come out there, we'll link up when I'm hunting whitetails or something. But
yeah, there you go. That's a good plan. Yeah, I like that. Now you're thinking.
Yeah, we'll get something going.
Yeah, and I'm around, and I don't know what my plans are this fall, but I'd love to help you guys out if you do come out this way. So definitely keep that in mind.
Yeah, I definitely will. So I guess with that being said, Josh, where can people find a little bit more of your work? I know you do some writing and some other stuff and everything else. Where can people find that?
Most of the writing that I do anymore is on Rokslide.com. So I usually do, 3 to 5, 6 gear reviews a year for those guys. And it's all kind of Western based gear review stuff. So if you look at Rokslide.com, you can find my articles, or you can just find me in the forums every once in a while. I'm in there. And you can look me up on Instagram as well. And that's this Josh_Boyd_MT. And so I try to post a couple images, every week or so, or every couple weeks, and just kind of keep it fresh and keep things Western and cover some of the stuff that I am doing. And I'll post up links to my reviews on Instagram as well, so they can follow me there.
Cool.
If they're interested.
Yeah, if you want to see some big elk on the ground and just the whole process and experience living in Montana, you should definitely check out his stuff. I definitely get jealous when I see some of those pictures. So.
Oh, it's great.
Yeah, but anyways, Josh, well, thanks for coming on here, man. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it as well. It's been fun chatting with you.
Yeah, and so we'll be having you back on here and talking soon.
All right, thanks a lot.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of East Meets West Hunt with your host, Bo Martonic. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit eastmeetswesthunt.com, Facebook at East Meets West Outdoors, and Instagram at East Meets West Hunt. If you enjoyed today's episode, please review and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.